All right, we are casually starting a webinar as we're all talking about dogs behind the scenes here. So welcome in, everybody. We've got about 190 of you registered for this one, which honestly is no surprise to me because this is always a really solid topic for open discussion in the community, largely whether that's in our forum at community.marketingops.com or in the Slack channels, but also here on the webinar. So for those of you who may not know me, I am Mike Rizzo. I am the CEO and founder of marketingops.com in the official home of the MoPros community. I am labeled as Marketing Ops host because I'm hosting the webinar at the moment, but I am going to pass the reins over to Drew Smith to act as our host and guide you through the rest of the session alongside Mr. Andrew Dimmick, who was the one that sort of prompted the question. You'll hear more about that in just a moment. But if you can hear me, please confirm that you can hear me and let us know where you're zooming in from today in the chat. Would love to make sure everybody is there and present. And for you hosts and panelists, if you do want to engage in the chat throughout, make sure you just change that toggle to everyone instead of hosts and panelists so that we can say hello to everybody. So hello, Heather from Charlotte. Love it. Love it. It's great to see everybody. Thanks for coming in. Okay, just a couple of housekeeping items, and then I'm going to pass off to go work on a migration project. Everybody loves those. This webinar is being recorded. It will be made available in the member vault at marketingops.com. So if you're here live, great, love it. Please engage in the chat. Feel free to ask questions there throughout. These two will do their best to sort of monitor and facilitate discussions throughout. And then if you do want to come back and check out the recording, please come check it out at marketingops.com. If you haven't joined us as a member, please consider. We have chapters all over, not just in the US, but also abroad. So we would love for you to be part of the local chapters, be a part of the online community, and drive discussions just like this one, so we can all learn from each other. But that's enough about all of that. We really need to get into the heart of the topic today. So I'm going to go away. You don't have to hear me anymore. And I'm going to bring on Drew and Andrew. And yeah, y'all have fun. Thanks, guys, for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. All right. Well, welcome everybody to our webinar. I'm going to start sharing my screen here in just a moment. And then we're going to get into the webinar. As we get into this webinar, I kind of want to just set the stage for how this is going to flow. So the way that this is going to flow is, think of this as you are a fly on the wall listening to a consulting conversation with somebody that is interested to figure out, do I need attribution in my organization? And we're going to run through a lot of the common questions that I would ask of an organization to gauge the amount of value that they're going to get out of multi-touch attribution. So that is what we're going to be doing today. You should all start to see my screen here, which says, should you actually be using multi-touch attribution? If you can see that, please just pop something in the chat and let me know that you can see it. And then we'll go ahead and get started. And if you do have questions throughout, go ahead and feel free to pop them in the chat as well. And either Andrew or myself will respond to those. So let's dive right in. So first off, before we get too far into this, what should you be taking away from this session? So I want you all to walk away from this session with what are the key indicators to look for to determine if my organization should be using multi-touch attribution. How does my go-to-market strategy / process influence this evaluation? How does my sales cycle influence this evaluation? How does my tech stack influence this evaluation? And a few other things. But ultimately, I want you to walk away with a framework that you can use in your organization to make this determination yourself. How much value you would get out of multi-touch attribution, and therefore, should you be doing it? So with that, who the heck are these people? Oh, we've got Bruno raised his hand. Bruno, can you pop your question in the chat window and we'll get you answered here. While Bruno is popping his question in the chat window, who the heck is talking to you today? Andrew, would you introduce yourself to the group?
I would. Thanks, Drew. It's good to see you again. For those of you who don't know, Drew and I go way back. He and I have worked together previous and past lives back when we used to work together at Lead MD and been around together. And he's someone I go to for this topic a lot. He really is, in my mind, the expert on attribution. So who am I? I'm Andrew Dimmick. I work at I work at Observe Point. I'm the marketing operations manager here. Been here for about a year and year and 3 months. It seems like time has flown, honestly. And since I've joined, my whole focus has really been on rebuilding some processes. Observe Point is a company that has been around for a few years, and we're hitting a pretty interesting stage of our growth. Because of that, we have a lot of kind of legacy systems and processes in place that it's time to review, time to change, time to rethink. And attribution is probably one of the biggest ones, just based on how we approach things. And that led to this conversation, and we're excited to talk more with you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. And I am Drew Smith. I am the CEO and founder of Attributa. We are a consulting firm that specializes in marketing attribution and marketing measurement. We do a lot of other stuff with marketing operations as well, but our true area of expertise is attribution and marketing measurement. And I am joined, because you know what? She will not leave my lap. I am joined by our Chief Happiness Officer, Maple, who is our 5-month-old Cavapoo mascot. So thank you, everybody, for joining and saying hi to Maple. So let's dive in. Let's dive in. So, what are we going to talk about today? So, what we're going to talk about is we're going to start with Andrew's problem statement. Then we're going to get into a little bit of a discussion about the go-to-market motion for Observe Point, the sales cycle, their tech stack, their marketing strategy, the people in the organization, any other discussion points that come up as we go. And then ultimately at the end, I'm going to help Andrew. I'm going to take all of that information that we've taken in, and I am going to come back to Andrew with my assessment of how much value they're going to get out of a multi-touch attribution system. And ultimately, do I think that they are a good candidate? So that's the way that this is going to flow. So Andrew, why don't you go ahead and get us started off with the problem statement, because you posted in the MoPros Slack community with this question. So I'd love for you to kind of, maybe for anybody that didn't see the question or see the thread, help the folks listening here understand why you are interested in multi-touch attribution and what prompted you to ask that question in the Slack channel.
Yeah. So let's take everyone back to the beginning of January as we approach the beginning of a new year. Pretty close to the beginning of a new fiscal year. We're offset here at Observe Point. So we just started our fiscal year 2026, and going into that thinking, what am I going to do for 2026 for attribution? It's been something that's been on my mind. And currently what our approach here at Observe Point is, I would say, very rudimentary. We are primarily a last touch attribution model. It's based on what was the campaign source that led to an MQL being created. That's how we approach attribution. It's very, very basic. It's very, very simple. It works. It has its flaws, as you could imagine. And we're getting to a point where, as we're going to talk about the go-to-market motion, there's some changes we're making to how we go to market and our overall approach. And that's opening up questions on, I think we need something else. We need something new. And the question that I put in the Slack community, which, as a plug for that, again, like Mike said, if you're not a member of the community, awesome resource available. So many incredibly smart people who answer amazing questions in there. And I posted this question. I said, hey, like I'm considering, do I need an attribution software vendor? Like, do I need something beyond just what Salesforce could provide? And the reason I asked that, even as somebody who's been in marketing operations for the past 8 years, is I've usually worked at smaller companies that don't have the budget for something like that or haven't needed it yet. And I'm reaching this kind of critical junction where, is it even necessary? And that's really what I wanted to look at. Because if you go ask a vendor, they're going to tell you, sure, yeah, you need this, and drop 50 grand on some tool, right? Like, but do I actually need it? Like based on what my current approach is. And I got some really, really good input and feedback from some really, really smart people there. And it led to Drew and I just kind of chatting offline and saying, hey, maybe we should turn this into a larger kind of exploratory conversation, show the community how we would approach this. And so that's the problem. That's the kind of the and that's what led to us having this workshop today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that, Andrew. We do have a hand raised. Bruno, I'm going to take you off mute here. Bruno, do you have a question or a concern here? Okay,
Yeah.
I guess not. We will move on. Um, okay, so let's start with Andrew. Tell us a little bit about how Observe Point goes to market. Are you guys doing demand gen? Are you guys doing ABM? Are you using PLG? Are you using a hybrid approach that combines those things? How are you going to market today?
Yeah. So here at Observe Point, we have a hybrid go-to-market model. We lean more towards, what I would consider kind of sales-led, right, and more enterprise motion. But we have a a free account process where anybody could go in and create a free account, and they get nurtured along to potentially become a paying customer. Or if they meet certain account criteria that we've identified, we surface those to our we call them ADMs here, account development managers. That's our BDR equivalent, to then try to drum up some meetings from those people. But our primary focus is on what I would consider kind of your classic sales-led B2B marketing approach that's been going on, right? Where we attend events and we have a lot of digital advertising, and those really did two primary pillars of channels, digital and events. And we get people that are interested and request demos or have meetings. We have but a few different conversion paths that we can take, and we can talk about those if you want to. And a lot of that, it part of that is just based on the type of companies that we attract. Observe Point, as we are what we call a web governance platform. So we will audit a website, or our software audits a website and identifies if you have any, what technologies are running, what tags are present. Are you honoring cookies for GDPR, or is your site accessible? Are you compliant with accessibility laws? Like, there's so many different use cases in this realm of web governance, and because of that, we deal with large organizations that sometimes are really high-profile organizations that are facing lawsuits. That's a big area for us. And so, as you can imagine, we're dealing with large enterprise companies. And I mean, just for the sake of, 7 out of the 10 largest banks are customers of ours. And because of that, there's a lot of potential to land and expand. So that's why we have this hybrid model. And but we do definitely lean more on this enterprise sales led motion, and the team is structured that way.
Okay, awesome. Andrew, a couple of folks mentioned in the chat that they're struggling to hear you a little bit, so maybe just talk a little bit louder if you could.
Okay.
I think that sounds good,
Is
but
that better? Okay.
that's better. Yes, absolutely. Now, let me explain why I'm asking this question, because the way that you go to market is going to impact the value that you're going to get out of multi-touch attribution. And let me just use like a really, really simple example. Let's say you're running ABM programs and you are sourcing all of your buying groups and buying committee members through ZoomInfo and LinkedIn Sales Nav. Well, that means that the original lead source is completely pointless for you to even measure, right? Because the original lead source is ZoomInfo, LinkedIn Sales Nav, Play, wherever you're getting the data from.
Yeah.
So that's why we start with this question, because how you go to market drastically impacts what you need to measure. So that's the
Yeah, and
purpose
that's a
behind
big
this
part of it
question.
too. I mean, since we're talking about this, right? We do rely. Maybe this is jumping forward a little bit. Like, we have ZoomInfo, we have user gems as well, where we are identifying these records, and we have seamless AI as well. So we have a few different data providers, and all of those do feed into Salesforce. And so, yeah, that definitely is a challenge, I would say, as well, where we sourced the record from ZoomInfo, but they didn't engage with us until like an event or something. So that definitely happens a lot. That is something that's very common for us.
Yeah, and in a scenario like that, exactly what you talked about right there, multi-touch attribution is going to add value because it's going to give you those second, third, fourth, fifth engagement points where that first source is completely pointless, right? Like who cares that it came from Zoom Info Sales Nav or LinkedIn Sales Nav or User Gems? Now, ultimately, you can still use that data to figure out, well, is it worth investing in User Gems? Is it worth investing in Zoom Info? Is it worth investing in LinkedIn Sales Nav? But from an attribution standpoint, it's pointless because it's not adding any value to your attribution, right?
Mm.
So let's move on to the next question here. So, Andrew, you just told us about how you go to market. That's great. Tell us a little bit about your sales cycle. How long is your sales cycle? Do you have any kind of ideas or hypotheses around how many touch points it takes to go from, a net new lead to opportunity creation and then on to a deal?
Yeah, it's long. It's very long. And as you can imagine, like, I think there's two reasons for that, I think. One of them being we are dealing with enterprise organizations, like really, really large companies. Like, I mean, here's one that I can say public, like PepsiCo. They're a company, they're a customer of ours. Like massive organization, tons of red tape, like entire procurement processes and teams. So we have a very long sales cycle. Um, and in terms of touch points, this is a really interesting one because this also leads into thoughts just about our overall sales process, where when somebody comes to us, the number of touch points can be great. It just depend on the channel. So like if it's someone that's coming to us through our paid advertising or organically just from our website, those sales cycles are typically shorter by about 2 months. They're actually a lot shorter. And that makes sense, right? If somebody's coming to you and requesting a demo, they've probably done a lot of research already. So that opens up a whole other area of a lot of unknown research that maybe we're not tracking correctly. Events does take a little bit longer because the definition of what's considered marketing qualified from an event can sometimes be a little muddy. So they'll come to us, they'll become they'll express interest, and then we'll try to continue to nurture them through using the account development team. So it can be pretty long. Like I think our average sales cycle length can be anywhere between 3 to 6 months, depending on the channel. And there's probably a lot of opinions on that. Like I think some people might see that and think, well, then you're not qualifying correctly, and some people might think, okay, that makes sense given your buyers. We could have an entirely separate conversation about that, but it is long, and there are a lot of touch points, especially as we get into with these. We're kind of transitioning a little bit further into some other questions around our marketing strategy, where we are going to be investing more into account-based marketing in 2026. So that involves a lot of campaigns that we're already planning to people that are already in a sales process, marketing to opportunities and marketing to customers as well. So yeah, hope that's a good starting point for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another one. I'll explain why I'm asking this question is because organizations that are really highly transactional, that have rapid sales cycles with very few marketing touch points throughout that sales cycle are going to naturally get less value out of multi-touch attribution
Okay.
than organizations with long sales cycles that need a lot of hand holding and a lot of, really, really tight engagement throughout. They're going to get more value out of multi-touch. So this really does matter. We had a couple of questions here. Jeff asked in the Q&A. Sharon, would you mind? I know Sharon, you raised your hand. Would you mind popping your question in the Q&A, and I'll get to that one in just a moment. So Jeff asked in the Q&A, what is your take on the amount of individual research that is done anonymously versus the known state interactions? And I think, Jeff, what you're referring to here is kind of that whole idea of like the dark funnel. The dark funnel exists. It's there. There's tons of evidence that it exists. My take on it personally is measure what you can measure and control what you can control. I cannot measure stuff that's happening in personal conversations at a bar. I can't measure it. I also can't control that. So I don't care. Quite frankly, I don't care that that's happening and that that's an invisible part of my funnel because I can neither measure it nor can control it. So personally, I don't factor that into any decisions about whether or not somebody needs multi-touch attribution because, messages in a Slack channel cannot be tracked. at all. So to me, if I can't track it, if I can't see it, if I can't measure it, I don't care about it. Now, there's other things that you can do to try to get more information on that, and see if there how much of an impact that is. But that typically requires actually doing first party research, meaning surveys and interviewing your buyers and ask them questions about how they found you and how they heard about you and what made them make their buying decisions, things like that. Which again sits to the side of multi-touch attribution. That's more of the why did you buy, not how did you buy. Multi-touch is designed to answer how did you buy, not why did you buy. Sharon has a question. Oh, no, no worries. Okay, cool. Sharon's all good. Cool. Perfect. So, Andrew, next up, tell us a little bit about your tech stack. What are you guys currently using right now?
Yeah, so we have what I would consider a pretty kind of a traditional and lean tech stack. So we have a lot of like our core, I would, is Marketo. We have Salesforce. Our CMS is WordPress. It's hosting our website. Our sales team uses Gog Engage. And like I mentioned, user gems. I've mentioned Zoom Info. So we have a lot of, we have a good amount, I think, for our size, but a lot of them are more smaller, more niche tools. But our core is, Marketo, Salesforce, Gong Engage. We use this really interesting tool called Mobley for lead capture at events. We use them, and so we have a lot of like those are like we have our pillar ones like Marketo and Salesforce, and then we have a lot of smaller things for more niche use cases. Is there anything like happy to drill into that if there's anything you want to
No,
cover?
that's good. That's exactly what I needed. So, and again, I'll get into the why I'm asking this question. Andrew's original question was adding software, right? Because Marketo and Salesforce both have some multi-touch capabilities. You can do multi-touch in Salesforce. You can do multi-touch in Marketo. So because they both have multi-touch capabilities, and same thing with HubSpot. If you have HubSpot, you do multi-touch in HubSpot, but there's limitations to them. So what you have to understand, what you have to factor into the equation here is the additional value that you're going to get from a multi-touch attribution software versus the native capabilities and functionality of Salesforce and Marketo. Now, if Andrew had told me that he's on Pardot, Pardot's multi-touch capabilities are nearly zero. So it changes the calculus that we're going to do to figure out how much value you're going to get from your from an additional multi-touch software purchase. So that's why we're asking this question here as well.
Can I ask a question now, Drew?
Oh, of course, yeah, go for it.
So this is part of what led to my even initial question is, and maybe we're going to discuss this as we go through, is at what point is what those softwares provide you just not enough?
Ah,
Right. And I think because like you and I even had like an offline conversation about like, well, what about Salesforce's campaign influence reporting and all those things, and maybe it needs to be a custom model versus not. I think that would be an interesting thing even for us to discuss a little bit more here is like, how do you know when you've exhausted what your current stack and allows you to do?
yeah, good question. So the way that I look at it is this: there is a natural progression of maturity when it comes to multi-touch attribution. And this goes on even after you've onboarded a multi-touch attribution platform and eventually decide, hey, we need to get the data out of the multi-touch platform into a data warehouse and into a business intelligence tool. And the way that I start understanding that somebody is ready for that next step, that you've outgrown what you're currently capable of, is you start asking more complex questions that require you to export the data to Excel and start manually doing data transformation in Excel.
Interesting.
So there's this natural progression. You're asking basic questions right now, trying to understand, what is the second, third, fourth, 28th thing that somebody engages with on the path to becoming a deal. That's a very natural question to ask. And then once you can answer that question, then you're going to start asking the next questions in line, right? And maybe at that point in time, Salesforce falls flat. Maybe at that point in time, Marketo falls flat. And that's when you're going to say, okay, well, these systems no longer meet our needs. They met our needs up until today, but they no longer meet our needs.
Interesting. So it's less about the model and more of the questions you're trying to answer.
Exactly. It's about the questions you're trying to answer of the data. And this is something that I always we do a lot of training for folks. And if anybody came to the 2024 Mopsapalooza in person, we did a workshop there about literally how to structure questions to answer, or how to structure questions to know what reports you should be creating. What should you even be reporting on? And so the goal here is not to just create reports in a vacuum. The goal is to understand what are the questions we're trying to answer with the data, make that question as narrow and focused as possible, and then build the report to answer that question. Now, a lot of people I want to answer every question. Well, that's not a structured approach.
Dashboard of everything, right?
That doesn't exist. It can't exist. It's fool's gold. But you essentially have to narrowly focus your questions, because even if your question is too broad, it makes it really difficult to build a report or even a dashboard sometimes that answers that question. So let me just give you a really quick example. A multi-touch question that comes up a lot is, for the marketing activities that we ran in Q1, how did they influence opportunities? That is a really good example of a narrowly focused question that can be turned into a report fairly easily. Now, the reason it's so important to turn these into questions is because all I have to do to require a completely separate report build with very different filters, with very different pieces of data that we're going to surface on the report is the first question was, for the marketing activities we did in Q1, how did they turn into opportunities? Well, let's just make a slight tweak to the question, which is, for the opportunities that were created in Q1, how did marketing influence those? Mm-hmm. Completely different reports, completely different filters, completely different fields that you might put on that report to display. But essentially what you're doing is you're querying the same set of data. You're just asking a different question to approach it from a different perspective. And so when you're asking questions in that manner, you will start asking more advanced and more mature questions. And then eventually your questions will be too complex for the software that you currently have.
Okay. I found that really helpful.
All right. So next up is, we got another question here. Jeff asks, where or would you use Marketo tags, custom tags, to help these analysis efforts? What are the limitations of going this route? Yeah, Jeff, great question. So this gets into like Marketo native functionality. Marketo tags, so if you were to decide that, if we were to make a determination that Marketo is going to be where you're going to do your multi-touch attribution, first off, you're going to need some of their more advanced features. So you're going to need like the advanced analytics tool that used to be called revenue cycle analytics. Now it's called advanced BI analytics or something like that. Or performance insights. Performance insights is kind of weak there. If the goal is to use Marketo for our reporting infrastructure for multi-touch, then Marketo tags do play a role in that, because you can use Marketo tags in Performance Insights. You can use Marketo tags in what used to be Revenue Cycle Explorer. Revenue Cycle Explorer and Revenue Cycle Analytics. You can use Marketo tags in there. I honestly don't think Marketo tags are really even as useful as they used to be, especially considering now you have the program member custom fields. Program member custom fields give you a little bit more advanced functionality than I think tags do. So, but again, it's really going to depend on the specific questions you're asking to make sure which you then evaluate tags to see if the tags are the right solution to that particular question. So, Andrew, talk to us a little bit about your marketing strategy. And I want to make sure we cover 3 very particular bullet points here. And I think you've kind of already hinted at some of these, but do you market to folks that have already MQL'd? Do you market to folks that are already in an open opportunity? And do you market to current customers? And before you answer that question, I want to modify these questions a little bit. And I want to insert the word, do you proactively market? Because there's proactive marketing, which means we are targeting people. And then there's reactive marketing, which is, they did a web search, they did a paid search and clicked on our ad. that's reactive versus proactive, right? So are you all proactively targeting folks that have already MQL'd or already an open opportunity or already customers?
That's a really good question. And so there's kind of two parts to how I'd answer how we're doing things. One is what we're currently doing, which is it kind of sits in this middle of reactive and proactive, where, for example, do we market to anyone who have already MQL'd? Yes. In the sense that we produce a lot of like industry reports and benchmark analysis. So being a tool, a software platform that audits websites, we can scan, like our own tool can scan any website in the world. So we get a lot of interesting insights on, hey, like, what are we seeing companies do and how they manage consent and compliance, and or their opt out processes for for collecting cookie. Like we get a lot of like first party. We do a lot of first party research on that, and our customer base eats it up. Like they love knowing where do they compare against their peers, and hey, like if the market is going this way, am I ahead? Like, so we produce a lot of research that way, and so we'll do a lot of one-off email campaigns to promote that content, regardless of where somebody is at in their journey with us, whether they're a customer, whether they're just a generic lead who maybe just did like a sample audit of their site. That's one of our conversion paths where somebody can just request, hey, audit 50 pages of my website and just tell me what you find. And so that's one piece. And then when it comes to open opportunities, one of our biggest and most effective motions is we do a good amount of field events, right? Where we have people that our sales team is really, really excited about, like real, again, long deal cycles, right? So we can, like, hey, we know that if we get this decision maker in the room and have a really good experience, that can be very effective for the deal. So we do that and it works really well. Market to current customers, we do a little bit more narrow, right? Like I mentioned, a lot of this content that we produce is very industry and market focused, and but we do have like kind of like our flagship. We host our own event in the fall every year that goes to both prospects and customers. But that is a big effort we get because we want our customers there so they can interact with our other customers and learn how to use our platform in better different ways, learn about trends in the market, right? It's a really good event that they're able to host or that they're able to attend. So this is kind of where I see how it's both reactive and proactive. Like it's not like we have dedicated programs to say, oh, when somebody reaches MQL, they're now enrolled in this type of program. When they reach, for us, SQO, sales qualified opportunity, they now go through these types of. We don't really have that level of maturity yet, but it is something that we're developing. Like I mentioned, we're going to be adopting account-based marketing as a focus in 2026, and identifying those one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many accounts based on certain signals that we see. We have a lot of those identified, and we're starting to build those lists. And that's going to come with some expectations of, hey, we see this signal that we care about. We're now going to design campaigns around it. So that's where we're at and where I think we want to go.
Okay. Okay. Are you guys doing much in terms of brand marketing versus demand? Like kind of, what's the internal philosophy on brand versus demand?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is it's really a question of budget. Like it's something that we want to do more of, and we're thinking about, hey, is there a better way? Most of our like paid advertising is mostly bottom of funnel conversion, with the exception of Google, right? We're big on our keywords and like our kind of those branded keywords for general awareness about Observe Point. But that's about it from a brand perspective. Outside of just you could like presence at like a trade show, you could argue that that's like a branded play as well. And so,
Sure,
but we don't
sure.
do any like display advertising. We don't do any of that. And that's not like we don't do it on purpose. It's just we're a smaller organization. Our focus right now is on just maximizing like that demand capture.
Yeah.
But it's something we're talking about, especially as we're doing this. We're going to be adopting an account-based marketing approach. Do we need to have this kind of surround sound air cover of display? We do, and that's maybe even a separate hour-long conversation. Do we even need that or not? Right? Does it work? Um,
hmm
so that's where we're at with there.
Okay. Okay. Again, let me explain the why behind these questions. So, the brand versus demand. If you're on LinkedIn, I'm sure you've seen and heard tons of conversations about how bad multi-touch attribution is at tracking brand. Well, I'm here to tell you that that's correct. When you have multi-touch attribution, it's predicated on people clicking on ads. And as we all know, the average click rate on a display ad is somewhere between 0.1 to 0.2%. So the impact of display ads is not coming through the click, it's coming through the brand recognition and the brand familiarity and the brand sentiment and stuff like that. So multi-touch attribution does really struggle to track brand. So if you told me we're doing a ton of brand marketing, then that's going to factor into my calculus as to, well, okay, you're going to get less value out of a multi-touch system then. Similarly, and I'm going to frame this next section in back to the conversation about questions. So, do you market to folks that have already MQL'd? There's a whole slew of questions that one would ask if you are proactively marketing to MQLs, trying to accelerate their deal cycle to opportunities. If you don't proactively market to MQLs, those questions don't apply to you. And those are big multi-touch questions.
Hmm.
Same thing for folks that are already in an open opportunity. If you're in an open opportunity, if you're not proactively being marketed to by marketing, because a lot of organizations, when they do the handoff to sales, marketing takes a step back, right? A lot of that's driven by sales, not marketing, but marketing takes a step back. So again, that's a whole slew of questions that one would ask about marketing's ability to accelerate open opportunities to wins or increase win rates or increase average deal sizes. Those are all multi-touch questions because they're happening so late in the funnel. So if you're not marketing to those folks proactively, you don't have those questions to answer. And lastly, for current customers, if you are not marketing to current customers, there's a whole slew of questions about marketing influencing renewals or upgrades or cross sells or upsells that don't apply to you. And
Hmm.
again, those are all going to be multi touch questions because they're happening so long after the first touch, and the last touch isn't really going to help you much on those. So that's why this one is such a big topic to see how much value you're going to get out of multi-touch. Organizations that answer a yes to all three of these questions are going to get more value than organizations that answer no to any of these questions.
Awesome.
So let's talk a little bit about your org chart. So I don't want you to just start listing your org chart for me. I'm going to ask you some very specific questions here. So in your organization, is the who owns like who owns the marketing tech stack? Is that like marketing operations? Is it revenue operations, biz ops? Who owns the marketing tech
Yeah, it's
stack?
marketing ops,
Okay.
and we have a centralized ops team. So I report to our senior director of revenue operations, who actually reports for us to our CFO. So like operations is
Okay.
highly removed from the revenue teams. It's lateral. It's lateral for us. But yeah, I own the tech stack. I make all the decisions about what we have, what we don't have. Obviously, in very close collaboration with my primary marketing stakeholders. Right, I'm not going to just go rogue and buy whatever I want. Like anyone who's followed me knows that I've spoken a lot about tech stack management, and I have really strong feelings about that. And
Yep.
so yeah, but I own that, and we're centralized as an ops team.
Okay. What about reporting and analysis? Is that centralized or is it distributed? Who is responsible for reporting on the performance of marketing?
Same, it's ops. So we'll prepare all the reports, all the dashboards. We use Domo. I should have mentioned that as part of our core stack. Like we use
Okay.
Domo, and all of our data flows into Domo. Um, and yeah, so it's really a big part of my role is to go to the marketing team and the other people in ops, to sales and CS, and you know proactively present like findings and like here's what we're seeing. It also does tie into how we do reporting anyways, and this is actually even a question about just um, how you would think about performance, like depending on like your goal setting. So for example, like we here at Observe Point, like our sales team, they're rewarded based on just all opportunities that they close. It doesn't matter where they're sourced from. And so really the only team that has any type of, for lack of a word, quota when it comes to sourcing opportunities is marketing. Like they have a specific goal, like, hey, you need to source X amount of pipeline and X number of closed revenue per year. And the other teams, they're comped very differently.
Hmm.
And so that, like, so that's it does make it interesting in the sense where we're not having to like fight over who gets credit for an opportunity. That's a really, really nice dynamic here at Observe Point, right? Like I know how people be I'm so jealous of that because every other organization I've been at has that power struggle. But it does open an interesting question of like how um does how marketing is graded, does that affect what model you want to use, right? Like for us, where no other team is comped or cares about the source of an opportunity, but marketing does, and we care about it from like how we're thinking about what's working. So that's kind of a segue into a question I would even ask is, does that affect what model you want to use?
It shouldn't, because multi-touch attribution should be used to figure out how to do better marketing.
Mm,
It should not be used as a scorecard for marketing or a scoreboard for marketing.
mm,
We don't want to get into, because you talked about, the territory wars between marketing and sales of like competing for sourced opportunities. You don't want to create that same type of territorial battles within the marketing department,
yeah.
right? So we don't, I would not use that to determine whether or not we should be or shouldn't be using marketing attribution or multi-touch attribution. Furthermore, on that, a lot of times what you're KPI'd on and what you're graded on, right, is based on what you can report on.
Mm,
Marketing cannot possibly be, expected to have a quota for influenced opportunities if you have no way to track and measure influenced opportunities. So a lot of times what'll happen is the way that marketing looks at itself or the way that marketing is goaled and KPI'd will change, sometimes significantly, sometimes moderately, sometimes minimally, when your reporting capabilities are enhanced.
interesting. That's really good insight. So sorry to derail that a little bit. If there's anything else we want to discuss
No,
about
no,
it.
no, no, you're good. You're good. Again, let me explain the why on this one. Multi-touch is infinitely more complex than single touch. Most people think it's like, well, no, you're just adding, the stuff in the middle. Well, yeah, but that increases your data set and data size exponentially. Not only that, but if you're to buy a third-party system, now you're going to bring in even more data, which is going to get down as granular as ad content, ad campaign name, texts. The capabilities that you have at your fingertips are just it explodes when you get onto a third-party software platform that does this type of stuff. And the reason I ask about the org chart is because a lot of times we get into scenarios where, well, yeah, I mean, we're just going to put the events team in charge of doing their own reporting and reporting on their own stuff. And that always is a red flag to me because of bias. That it's a training issue. You have to make sure that they know how to use the different models that come with your third-party attribution system, because a lot of people are just, they're going to use the model that makes them look the best. That's the bias part. So with a centralized reporting and analysis function, that actually fits multi-touch much better than a distributed
Mm,
reporting and analysis function from a training standpoint, from a usability standpoint, and making sure that we're driving to the right outcomes.
nice. That's interesting.
So that's actually my last question. You've answered everything that I want to know to do this evaluation. So how much value would you get out of multi-touch attribution based on what we now know? So first off, every org on the planet can get some value out of multi-touch attribution. The question is the value worth the expense? Is the juice worth the squeeze here? Will we get enough value out of this tool to justify the cost, time, and effort? Well, will we? And the way that I'm going to answer that question is, Andrew, your organization has a lot of the hallmarks of an organization that would get a lot of value out of multi-touch. You've got your go-to-market motion is a hybrid motion. You source a lot of records through systems like ZoomInfo, LinkedIn Sales Nav, and I think you said Seamless AI and a few others, which means that first touch and lead source really doesn't matter at all. What matters is the stuff that happens after that. You do market proactively to post MQLs, post ops, and post customer folks. That translates really well to multi-touch. You have the the centralized reporting system, and analysis function. That's a really good hallmark indicator there. You're not focused on brand from a marketing standpoint. So again, that's a good positive indicator there. Um, Let me see here. Let me try to go back here. Oh, you have a long sales cycle that requires a lot of touch points. One of the things that really that stood out to me is the fact that because you have such long sales cycles, you all do a bunch of field events that are targeted for folks that are in open opportunity cycles. The only way to figure out how those are performing is through a
Yeah.
multi-touch strategy, right? If you're not doing multi-touch, you're going to miss the signals about whether those field events are performant, are they worth the expense, and not only that, but which ones are working and which ones aren't working, right?
Yeah. I mean, we literally had this conversation yesterday about, it's not a field event, but it's one of our events that we attend. It's a very micro event. It's called the CPO Forum, Chief Privacy Officer
Mm-hmm.
Forum. Great, great event for us because we're talking to people that are so just focused on website privacy compliance, right? And the way that that event functions is the attendees will request to meet with you. Like it's a really, really cool event. And we had people that were on that attendee list that we didn't meet with that were like, hey, this is a really good account that we want to maybe go after. So the sales team begins reaching out. And then when we look at from an attribution standpoint, our attribution breaks down because somebody that eventually an opportunity was created with an account that did not MQL because we didn't meet with them, but through further outreach, they we did open an opportunity. But then the opportunity reporting broke because there was no marketing qualified, there was no MQL, like there was nothing that indicated they had MQL. But so we kind of got into a little bit of back and forth internally of, well, why are we attributing it to this event when they didn't MQL from the event? It's like, well, we wouldn't have even had the conversation with them if it wasn't for this event to begin with, right? So that it was a real that it's becoming this big challenge for us of showing where things actually coming from and what's actually working.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really good example yesterday.
Yeah. So it's also timely for you guys because you guys are asking these questions right now, right?
Yes.
So now here's where I'm gonna say here's what I'm gonna say for you guys. So if you had asked me to do a consulting project for you and do this evaluation, we would have done a lot deeper dive into data and stuff like that. But ultimately, what I would say is this: you should, at a bare minimum, get started building the architecture to do multi-touch inside Marketo and Salesforce. Period. End of story. You've got all the hallmarks of somebody that's going to get value out of multi-touch. Now, before I get into the next part of this statement, let me explain one of the big differences, some of the biggest differences between doing multi-touch through Marketo and or Salesforce versus a third-party system. Okay, so doing the doing multi-touch through Salesforce uses campaign influence, and unless you have it's like I think it's an advanced multi-touch package that Salesforce sells that gives you different models. You only get one model, and that model is essentially it's actually not even a model. What it does is it gives 100% of the opportunity to every single campaign that influenced the opportunity. So that means when you're doing your analysis, every dollar is counted multiple times. Every dollar is replicated across every campaign that influenced that opportunity. It also requires pretty robust campaign architecture. And another area where there's a thing that you need to be aware of is the way that Salesforce stores costs. Salesforce only stores marketing spend on the campaign object. And differently to Marketo, you don't get to put in a monthly spend. So let's say, for example, you're spending money 3 months in a row on the same campaign. It's an ongoing campaign. In month one, you spend 5 grand. In month two, you spend 10 grand. In month three, you spend 5 grand. That's a total of $20,000 of spend, right? Salesforce, because you only put in a total spend and the time frame, Salesforce actually has to amortize that across all 3 months. So it amortizes it equally across all 3 months. So if you were to do cost per lead, cost per opportunity, cost per deal, the cost per metrics or ROI, they would all be off because the
Yeah.
spend can't be segmented by the month in which the spend actually happened. So Salesforce, there's the caveats for Salesforce, right? With Marketo, you get a linear model. So every single campaign or program that influenced an opportunity gets an equal share of the opportunity. That's fine. At least that way you're not double counting dollars, right? Um, Marketo's cost structure is the period cost, which you do get to put the month in. So you'd be able to do the 5, 10, 5 thing in Marketo, which works really well. It's a much better system. But if you don't already have the advanced analytics, the revenue cycle, whatever it's called, it used to be called Revenue Cycle Explorer, Revenue Cycle Analytics. If you don't already have that, you have to get an upgrade from Marketo anyway. So in that scenario, you might start looking at third-party systems anyway, because if you're already going to have to spend more money, why not look at the other options, right?
Specialized for that. That's interesting.
Exactly. So for you guys though, because the underlying principles of doing multi-touch in Salesforce and Marketo are very similar to the underlying principles of using a third-party software, get started building the infrastructure now to do multi-touch in those platforms. And then as soon as you start seeing that these flaws are going to cause problems for you, or that your questions are already getting too complex for Salesforce or Marketo, then start looking at a third-party software platform. My guess is you all will be looking at a third-party software platform fairly quickly after launching multi-touch in either Salesforce or Marketo because of your needs, and your questions are going to get pretty advanced pretty quickly.
Okay, that's good to know. I'll keep that in mind. I have another question, but we have a question in the Q&A. I think let's let Nick get his question answered.
Yes, Nick's question is, I'm a marketing analyst who has managed our multi-touch attribution model for 6+ years now. Leadership has always tasked me with scaling our multi-touch attribution metrics across almost all of our reporting and performance analysis. Should multi-touch attribution be the primary source of performance analysis and decision-making, or should it be treated more as a supporting feature that provides additional insights to stakeholders? Great question, Nick. Personally speaking, multi-touch attribution is not the end goal. It's not. Because you're going to have other questions that cannot be asked by multi-touch attribution. For example, if you're spending money on brand, it's really difficult to understand the value that you're getting from brand from multi-touch attribution, which is where things like incrementality testing and media mix modeling start to play a really, really important role. That's just one example. Again, multi-touch attribution tells you the how people buy. It doesn't tell you why people buy. If Andrew were to buy from me, I would probably, if I were using multi-touch attribution, it would probably say the webinar.
Yeah.
No, Andrew's not buying from me because of this webinar. Andrew's buying from me because Andrew and I have a relationship that goes back several years and he trusts me. The why cannot be measured by marketing attribution, multi-touch attribution. So Nick, multi-touch attribution is not the end goal. It is one step in the journey, and you should absolutely have other methodologies that answer questions that multi-touch attribution cannot answer. We have another one from an anonymous attendee. What are some examples of the more complex questions that a tool would help answer? Again, so I talked about like brand. Brand is well, actually, so that a tool would help answer. Sorry. So the more complex questions would be like, for example, hey, we want to understand all the marketing that happens in between MQL and opportunity that are helping advance opportunities to deals, right? We want to understand all the marketing. What are the marketing activities that happen between opportunity creation and opportunity closure that are contributing to a higher win rate or a higher average deal size? Hey, what are the marketing tactics that are happening that are leading to losses because of budget? What are the marketing activities that are leading to disqualifications due to bad data? Because it's not just necessarily a source that causes somebody to MQL that turns into bad data. There could be 20 touch points that led to an MQL that turns into a bad data disposition. So those are some examples of more complex questions. And then let's get even further down the funnel here. predictive analytics. If we want to get predictive in any way, shape, or form, what I can tell you is this: standard lead sourcing is not going to get you predictive metrics. You need a lot better data than just sourcing to do anything predictive. Media mix modeling is a whole different animal, but you can do some entry level predictive modeling with a multi-touch attribution tool. But if you are not tracking every single touch point on that journey, your predictive modeling is going to be what I would call for entertainment purposes only. We got another question from Joju. For a multi-touch attribution till closed won, is there a way to account for sales efforts? Typically, sales thinks it owns the credits after opportunity is created until it's closed. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the attribution platforms out there give you the ability to create, I'm just going to refer to it as touch points generally, create touch points for when sales gets somebody on the phone, or when sales gets a reply to one of their emails, or when somebody books a meeting from a sales email. You can turn those actions and those activities into touch points that factor into the multi-touch attribution journey, just the same as the marketing touch points. So you get to see the interplay between them. So, you might find that sales sends an email on Tuesday, marketing invites somebody to a webinar on Wednesday, and on Thursday, we get a reply to sales email on Tuesday. Did that marketing email inviting them to a webinar have an impact on that response that sales got? Maybe, maybe not. We'd have to look at the data and see if there's anything more than just one data point to support that, but that's entirely possible. So you can certainly turn sales activities into touch points that factor into your multi-touch attribution kind of modeling. Great question, Joji.
Yeah, really good questions.
I hope I pronounced your name right. I apologize if I didn't. Yeah, Andrew, did you have another question?
Yeah, I do. This is more of a tactical question, and hopefully, it's other people may be thinking this. If we're thinking about the infrastructure, right? Like you basically said, hey, you need to focus on getting this infrastructure built. And I built my infrastructure in a very flat way, right? Like where I've almost eliminated campaign hierarchies. And I'm almost wondering now, is that right? Like, is that wrong? I mean, there's probably different ways of thinking about that. And I'm really curious on your opinion of, if you're going to do multi-touch attribution, do campaign hierarchies in Salesforce hurt or help you?
Good question. So that's going to depend on if you're going to use a third-party system, it can hurt the third-party system more than it helps the third-party system. If you're not going to use a third-party system, if you're going to use Salesforce or you're just going to use Marketo, then hierarchies will actually be fine. So because I suspect that you all are going to graduate to a third-party system fairly quickly, I probably wouldn't go back and engineer campaign hierarchies. What I would focus on is getting my UTM parameters locked down. I would focus on making sure that every time we execute a Marketo program and Salesforce campaign, that we do it the exact same way every single time, using the exact same statuses, member statuses. Make sure that you've got a really, really strong strategy for how you use the responded/success flag for your program and campaign member statuses. And make sure that you have a really good campaign naming convention in place that's also extremely consistent and also very specific, because your campaign naming system will play a major role in how much value you get out of a third-party system.
Well, the good thing is, you know me and how detail-oriented I am, so I think we have a lot of that covered. So that's actually really reassuring. Thanks for.
I have no doubt that you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know that we are right at time. So, before we move on, just a big thank you to Mike Rizzo and the rest of the MoPros team for putting this together and hosting this. Thank you all for joining and listening and asking great questions. If you do have any other questions that didn't get answered, you're welcome to reach out to me either in the MoPros Slack community, I'm in there, or on LinkedIn. You can find me there as well. And obviously, you can also find Andrew on both of those as well. So you're welcome to ask him questions too if you think I'm an idiot, that's fine too. Ask him the questions.
Oh, I hope no one gathered that from you.
All
Thanks everybody as well. Thanks for listening to this conversation. It was a pleasure to be with you.